This is To Live Unrelenting, the podcast, episode number 3. I am your host, Aaron Belgowan. I want to quote Dostoevsky to start. He said once that life imitates art, and then art will imitate life, and then life will get its very meaning from the arts. I think that at this point in our society, we very much get our meaning from the arts. We wait for the next release of the Marvel movies, and we wait for our favorite artists to drop their new albums, and we wait for new video games to come out, things to entertain us because we've made life so meaningless. So we look to things that we perceive as being beautiful to give life meaning. There's a conversation to be had about what Christians need to be doing in the space, the art space. And so today with me, I'm really honored to have in my presence Nate Feldpausch, who is an artist and a Christian. Nate, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So Nate, who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Nate Feldpausch. I am a Master's of Business Administration student at Michigan State University. I also oversee a residence hall at Michigan State University. So my formal position would be Assistant Community Director. So I supervise resident assistants, as well as just like meeting with residents whenever they need some sort of guidance or just kind of like helping them grow and learn what the procedures and policies are. So a lot of mentorship and honestly just a missions field. Yeah. Like a crazy missions field. Absolutely.
So how old are you also? How old are you?
So I'm 25 years old, quarter century.
Very good. It's a missions field. Why is MSU a missions field right now?
I mean, it's funny. Like the harvest is ripe whether we see that it's ripe or not. So I told you earlier this morning, before we sat down for this podcast, I was watching the Jesus Revolution last night. So without giving too many spoilers, this hippie sits down with this pastor, and he's explaining that he's like, this generation that you don't understand, that's abusing drugs, abusing alcohol, sleeping around, they're searching for God and all those things. So whether we see that these kids are seeking God, maybe we don't see them all sitting down in a church right now. Maybe we don't all see them praying and praising the Lord, but they're seeking Him. Every generation, every heart is seeking Him. They're yearning for Him. I've had conversations with my classmates before. I'm like, whether you realize it or not, every entire soul in this building has been created with a yearning, a longing for Him. It's that everlasting void that can only be filled by Him. And so being able to speak to these students, to these classmates, to my coworkers, my supervisors, in this pivotal point in their lives, it's really speaking with a sense of urgency. Like you're at a crossroads now, and you'll be at a crossroads even further down the road. So get right before Him now. Not in just the sense of an insurance policy, but in the sense of you'll be able to experience the fullness of His love, which is life, which is light. So, I mean, there's no greater glory or honor than to share His word. And these kids are burning. They're burning inside. Some of them are trying to act too cool for school, and that's a dumb idiom right there. But it's like, no, it's like I know you think there's more. You want there to be more. That's why I always ask them. I'm like, sometimes I don't even ask them. I'm like, there is more, and you want there to be more, and He is that more that you're looking for. Like in all your classes and your hopes for achievements in your career, for your family, being accepted by society, like all in every piece of that, at the heart of it is that you just desire an unfailing love. That's what it says in Proverbs. What a person desires is an unfailing love. A love that endures forever. Yeah. So we speak to that. We know what their desires are because we were in their shoes.
True.
And we were given the gift of salvation and the gift of belief, the gift of faith. Faith is a gift. Like, Lord, thank you that you would work in my heart, that I could receive the gift of faith, that I might believe and receive your salvation. And that happens through an encounter. Lord, you opened my eyes that I would encounter you. I would receive that gift. I would receive that faith, that I might confess with my lips and believe in my heart. Not just saying it, not just reading the word blindly. It's like, oh my gosh, Lord, you opened your word to me. You opened your arms to me. It wasn't that you were never near to me. It's that you tuned me into being, to understanding that you're near to me right now. And so all these kids, they're trying to draw near to him, but sometimes they either have overthrown, like I think it's Psalms 2, and this is what Francis Chan spoke to in Grand Rapids on Thursday night. It's the kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the generation that we live in. They're trying to overthrow the shackles of like, no, but like being a slave to him, that's freedom. Like, I would rather be a slave to him than a slave to my sin.
Yep.
And like, those are your only choices. You do, like, there is no in between. There is no gray area with him. It's a yes or a no. Like if you try to do a maybe, with your wife or your significant other, that's not gonna work. I don't know. We'll maybe do this. Mm-hmm. You eventually have to reach a crossroads. Like, you can't do 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's the way he is. And so it's like, you're either going to be a slave to sin, and the wages of sin is death, or you're going to choose God, and the gift of God is eternal life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's really speaking to, like, you're at the crossroads now. Whether you realize it or not, you're at the crossroads now. So choose. And it's not the pressure. It's like, hey, man, it's a choice. God is he's so gracious. He's given us a choice. I don't even deserve to have a choice. I don't even deserve. He is sovereign. That's what Job is all about. If he struck me down right now, like, we are all worthy of his wrath. No matter how righteous you are, we are all worthy of it. Like, he could strike me down right now, take every possession that I own, and he would be just for it.
Yes.
I couldn't even be mad at him. And in fact, my response, the appropriate response to that should be praise and worship. Because he is still worthy. Mm-hmm. So it's speaking to that. It's like, no, this is the God of the universe. And he loved you. He loved you. That's what people want. They want to believe in a love they know that they didn't earn, they don't deserve, that won't leave them.
Yeah.
That's what they're yearning for. That's what these kids are crying out for. I've gone to calls, so I have to hold a duty emergency phone on the weekends sometimes. And I've gotten calls where there's these young girls that are they're so drunk. They're passed out. And you see, like, that's somebody's daughter. That's not just, like, that's somebody's daughter. Like a human father and a human mother. That's their daughter. And that's also his daughter. Mm-hmm. And it just, like, there's something about seeing that. It just grieves your spirit. Like, you don't see your value. You don't see the identity that he's given you. Like, you are his daughter in whom he is well pleased. It's not just it's not just to the men. It's like, oh, you are his son in whom you're well pleased. It's also to the daughters. It's like, you're his daughter in whom he's well pleased. Mm-hmm. And you go to these calls too, where it's like sometimes some kid is struggling with suicidal ideation, and he hit his head against his door so hard there's wood chips coming off, and it's like, man, like, you are being tormented. But it's like, man, if you would just seek his presence. That's where freedom is. These kids want freedom. They want freedom and they want love. So we speak to that.
Yeah.
It's not just what happened on the 13th. It's been going on before that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think too, for this generation especially, we've grown up with so much superficial stuff. Mm-hmm. We've grown up with so much entertainment, so many fake books, mm-hmm. fake movies that are about not real stories. I think that a lot of them want something that's real, mm-hmm. something that is rock solid and will not be moved.
Mm-hmm. Something that's not manufactured.
There's
some times when I'm spending time with the Lord and I'm like, Like I fasted back in January when we were all doing it as a church, and I'm like, Lord, I need to hear you. That's why I'm fasting. And I had these conversations with people. I'm like, all right, I'm not hearing him yet as clearly as I want to. I'm like, I'm doing everything I can. And they're like, so stop. Like, why are you trying to dredge up the voice of the Lord? Why are you trying to like manufacture his presence and his voice? Do you not think that he'll come and see you? Don't you think that he loves you, that he's with you? He's going to speak to you. He's going to. I tell my RAs, call upon the name of Jesus. See what happens. It's not my reputation at stake. I got no skin in the game. We're supposed to live as dead men, dead in our flesh, spirit man becoming more and more alive every day. So it's like, call upon his name, see what happens. I dare you. Like, dare him. It's like, I dare you. Call upon his name and see what happens.
Yeah.
Just one touch. It's that woman who was bleeding for 12 years. One touch changed everything. Just one encounter. I was like, just one encounter. I told my RA, it's like, just one encounter and see what'll happen. I said, your life will never be the same. And that is a promise. I'm like, it sounds scary. Like, because it's a little scary, but it is a good kind of scary. Because you realize anything can happen. All your plans that you made before, they're cute. They're cute, bro. They're cute. But then he gets in your life and he starts doing something in your heart. And you're like, all right, I'm going to take my hands off the wheel. I'm going to put my foot on the gas because you told me to. You told me to keep my hands to the plow. You told me to keep pushing forward. But wherever you want to steer me, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. Lord, send me. There is no greater purpose. My life avails nothing if you're not in it, if you're not at the heart of it, if your spirit does not accompany me. You know, Jonathan Edwards, we're not going to get into conversations about Calvinism, I promise you that. But Jonathan Edwards said something that was really profound. He said, ministers should beg the Spirit to accompany them in their ministries. I was like, ooh. I was like, Lord, I just want to see you working in my life. I want to be your hands, your mouth, your feet. Like, I want to see you do great works in, through, and around me. I'm talking about has to do with me, has nothing to do with me. I just want to see you move. I need it. I need you, Jesus. I can't even share the gospel. I can't even speak about him without him. So I need his spirit.
Yeah.
And that's not manufactured. When we speak to that peace, that joy, like, you know, 1 Thessalonians 4:13, it says, do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. Like, man, there's times where I'm like, you know, I got worried about a test or a quiz. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I fail out of my MBA program? Call my dad. I'm like, yo, what am I going to do? He's like, you're going to be okay. Like, that, the only people who have ever helped me get through anything were people who had Christ at the center of their lives. Truly.
Yeah.
Truly. Like, people can give you good advice, but what will give you peace in your spirit is somebody who's operating out of hope. And that's a Christian. That's nobody else. That is a Christian. That is someone who is Christ-like. Who's operating out of not their own authority, but his authority.
Yes.
So that's what was different about us, is we have that hope that's on authority from somebody else.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you came into that authority. How did you come to follow Jesus Christ?
Man, it was a process. It was a real process. So I grew up in a house where I read the Bible every night. Went to a Christian private school until I was in 7th grade. Then 8th grade and on, I went to public schools. My mom prayed in tongues. Like, this woman loves the Lord still to this day. Passionate. I mean, she's the kind where she'll speak right to the heart of hearts. She calls a spade a spade. If something is working in her, if the Spirit is telling her about something, best believe she's either praying about it or she's going to tell you about it. She's going to come to you about it. So I knew, like, what time of day it was. But my relationship with the Lord as a child was transactional. It was about, what can I get? Instead of realizing, like, oh, you giving me salvation. You don't owe me anything. You don't owe me anything. You didn't even owe me salvation. So when I didn't see things coming together, I got bitter. And I also seared my conscience. You know, in the Word it talks about being careful about searing your conscience. I seared my conscience and started making concessions as a young kid. So I found myself, by the time it was high school, I had relied on other people for my relationship with God. So I was hearing the voice of God by a proxy instead of going to him directly and having those intimate moments. And so I just found myself junior year of high school. And then from junior year of high school, 17 to about 21 years old, 4 years living in the wilderness on my own volition. I dropped out of college for about 2 years. I tried just about everything you could try. I tried drugs, tried drinking, slept around, and I was left broken and devastated to the core. Well,
let's back up a minute. So this is around college time. When did you start saying that Jesus wasn't enough and you went to other things? What was that line in the sand?
So it was sophomore year of high school. I was going to Mount Hope's youth ministry, spin ministry, and my group leaders, they decided all at the same time. There was 3 of them. There was about 8 of us, 7 or 8 of us, and they decided they're like, hey, we're all leaving the ministry at the same time for different reasons. One of them,
just like your youth ministry, just all leadership gone.
Boom! All the guys that we were like that had been pouring into us for like 2-3 years, like that we had built up connections with. We'd go get breakfast with them, lunch. We'd do life with them.
Yeah.
Like we'd spend time at their houses. They knew us. They knew our families. Boom! They just left. One decided he's like, hey, I'm gonna get connected at this other church where my friend is, becoming a pastor. So it was City Life. That was the church he was going to. And the other guy, he was like, hey, I don't agree with what this ministry is speaking to, which was interesting. And then the other one was like, hey, I just feel like God is calling me to focus more on these aspects of ministry moving forward in my family. And so, we had to respect each one of them for, what they had shared with us. They were honest.
Yeah.
But we had been relying on them for our relationship with God, and we kind of all just made the decision collectively, like, all right, if these guys aren't here, we don't want to go here anymore. So we're just going to do our own thing, and we're going to try and find God by ourselves, which it just really had to do with like, all right, we're just going to do whatever we want to do. It's funny, like leading up to that, we turned knowing God into a competition. Like, all right, who can know God the best? Who can know the word the best? And we just would turn it into theology conversations and philosophy. And it's like, it's funny. We just started living like Pharisees, even though we were like not even following the law. You know what I mean? So it's missing the plot. You know what I mean? Like we missed the plot of who he is. Because again, it was transactional. Right. It was all about like, all right, we want power and influence. So as long as God gives us power and influence, then we'll remain in the church. Like, it was just egotistical young men who thought they had it all figured out, didn't want to listen to anybody, and just truly weren't living a submitted, surrendered life. Like, we weren't in that position yet of desperation. And desperation yields some insane results. And we weren't desperate enough for him.
Yeah.
And God is, he'll encounter you whether you want him to or not, but he's also respectful. Like if you say to him, I don't want anything to do with you, he'd be like, all right. Like we'll see. But it was still funny. Like even throughout those 4 years, it was just like, there were times where I would literally get on the floor of my bedroom and I had like rebuked the Lord in prayer. I was like, Lord, I want nothing to do with you. Like I was just so angry at him for no reason really, other than just like the bitterness and selfishness that was in my heart. And then there were nights where I'd just like fall on my face in my floor of the bed, in my bedroom, and I was just like, oh my gosh, Lord, forgive me, save me. Like I'm gonna die. Please save me. I'm so sorry. And then the next day I'd fall right back into sin. Like I knew that he was real. I let the world confuse me with so many noises and so many voices instead of listening to the voice, seeking him here. And so it was a process. I remember coming home and my mom would pray. She'd be praying in the bedroom or the living room, and she would just be in tears, like communion with the Spirit, just like speaking in tongues, like pleading with the Lord for my soul. Like, that stirred something in me. Like, I have a mom who prays. That is such a blessing. I've got a father who is so patient with me, an earthly father who is so patient with me, which was why I think I've been able to see who the Heavenly Father is, because I had such great examples in my house.
Yeah.
And my mom said, she's like, as soon as I said, all right, Lord, I'm surrendering him to you, there is nothing that I can do. It's everything that you can do. She said, as soon as I did that, she said, I saw a change in your life. It was around 2019, about the fall, summer or fall 2019. I started going to Element Church that met in the Kellogg Center of MSU.
Yep.
Okay. And I think Pastor Scott is their pastor. And I started going back. I'm like, all right, Lord, my life is in shambles. I've tried everything. For some reason, I feel like this is where peace is. I've struggled with peace. I'm like, but I feel like this is where peace is. I mean, his title is Prince of Peace. So I'm like, all right, if that's who you are, let's see what it is. And I didn't have a completely pure reason. I'm like, all right, Lord, if I'm going to meet my wife, she's probably going to be here. And God used that. Not married yet, but God used that to welcome me into the fold. And man, he was, my heart was like stone, but he was chiseling away until he could finally just stick a dagger in there. And that moment was probably August or September of 2020 when I first came to young adults. And it was a group night, small groups night. And that week, like, Pastor Jeff had been preaching, and he said, it was on Sunday, he's like, put your hand on your heart. This is near the end of the service. He's like, put your hand on your heart, ask God to give you a name of somebody that you're going to reach out to this week. You're going to pray for them right now, and you're going to reach out to them. I kept my hands by my side, rigid. Like, I'm not doing that. Lord, I want community. I want friends. You put my name on somebody else's heart. Stubborn, bro. So stubborn. And wouldn't you know it, Jordan Townsend comes up to me after service. And I've known Jordan since I was about 4 years old. We grew up together, went to Lansing Christian School together. We'd been to each other's birthday parties. Our parents knew each other. But we hadn't talked to each other in years. Probably maybe 3-4 years. Like maybe since high school. And he comes up to me, just asks me how I'm doing. Pastor Kevin, the leader of our church, comes up to me, starts talking to me. They invite me to young adults. I'm like, I'll see. Then Pastor Peter calls my mom on Thursday night right before service. And he's like, hey, is Nathan there? Can I speak with him? Pastor Peter invites me to grab lunch with him, like a week or so. And I get off the phone, and my mom was like, well, you better go to young adults now. She's like, I said, I don't know what more confirmation you need. Go to young adults, because God has been calling out to you. He's reaching out to you. Are you going to be obedient? Because obedience is a fruit of love. Like, being obedient to his commands, that's what love is right there. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go. And the whole time I show up, I'm like, I'm going to just stand in the back, and I'm going to sneak out. And as soon as I get there, Jordan's standing on the table, getting ready to disperse everybody to their groups. And he snaps his finger and he points at me. He said, Nathan, it's good to see you tonight. It was being seen right there. Like, he was the eyes and the mouth of the Lord right then. It's like, okay, I'm seen. They actually want me here. This isn't just to rustle up numbers. This isn't for show. But I was still hesitant. But we get in those rooms. Everybody's talking about the Lord. I'm like, get a load of this. I've got all these walls up. And then all of a sudden, I can't remember what it was. But somebody said, all right, let's get up and pray. And I'm telling you, the thickness of the presence of the Lord fell upon that room. I was stunned. These are guys that were my age. They're speaking in tongues. They're giving each other words of life. And it is not manufactured. And you came up to me. Michael Simpson came up to me. Bram came up to me. And Teapot came up to me. You guys had never talked to me before. Never knew me before. I went to the same high school as Michael, but I never had a conversation with him before. You guys had never met me before. Never talked to me before. And you spoke directly into pieces of my life that there was no reason you should have known about. And I was stunned. I was like, oh, you do hear me, and you do see me, and you do care about me. I was like, that's the thing, like in the course of like from 2020 to 2023, it's like, how could you love me? I was a slave. I was a nobody, and you call me to be a son. Like, who am I? Like, what is mankind that you're mindful of them? Mm-hmm. That's the word that just keeps, like, that's the word for this year for me. Is like, what is mankind that you're mindful of them? Not just that you would give them an insurance policy, but you would give us a purpose. The greatest purpose there ever could be, to share the gospel. And I wasn't even there yet in 2020, but it was just like, oh my gosh, he's been running after me this whole time. I thought it was all on me. And he's been running after me? He's excited to be around me? He knows who I am and he understands me? Mm-hmm. Man, I was like, I'm coming back. I'm getting more. Whatever this is, I want more of it. Mm. And from then on, I got baptized that fall of 2020. I think it was November. It was just, it was a lot of pruning from then on forward. Pruning, the sin, the desires of the flesh from my heart, just constant pruning, just changing my desires, changing my appetites, and man, just utter and complete transformation in every area of my life. Yeah. And now I'm here. It's like this summer I get to serve at a city rescue mission in Lansing, and it's like, Lord, I get to share the gospel. Never thought I would. I was always like, man, I'm gonna make a ton of money, I'm gonna buy a big house, I'm gonna have a nice car. My whole life was about me. And then I was like, oh, that makes me miserable. That's misery. There's something I wrote a long time ago, about maybe last summer, and I wrote, earthly riches are rags if I don't have you. It was really realizing, like, oh, Lord, as long as you're at the center of my life, my first focus, my first love, as long as I seek your kingdom first, everything else will be added on to me. And that's not why I seek your kingdom first, but it's like, no, that's what I'm gonna do. I want my heart with you, because you can be trusted with my heart. Even when I'm afraid, I'm like, Lord, I'm not sure, like, I deserve your wrath. He is still so trustworthy. What is it? It's I think it's like a bruised reed he will not break.
Bruised reed he will not break. That's Isaiah 53, I think.
Is it Isaiah 53 or is it Isaiah? Oh, it's Isaiah 42. Oh. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. Like, that was literally like the verse that I read yesterday. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's like, Lord, when I've been down bad, I was so deserving of your wrath. And I was feeling overwhelmed. Like, you came to me and you comforted me. I'm like, like, those are the moments where you're just like, why do you love me? Why do you love me? Like, there's so many times where I'm like, it's honestly operating in that revelation. Why do you love me? Not out of the sense of like, I need you to answer that question, but the gratefulness and the thankfulness. Lord, why do you love me? How could you love me? One thing Pastor Richard Crisco said was like, and this is honestly like the heart that I want whenever I minister, is he's like, I'm just a beggar speaking to a room full of beggars where to find food. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the heart that I want. In the Jesus Revolution, like, there's a scene where the pastor of the church, he's got all these hippies flooding his church. And the congregation that he's had for so long, they're older, very rigid, they dress nicely, Sunday best, dressed to the nines. You know what I mean? Like, you got the shiny shoes, you got your suit on, and they're complaining about these hippies. They're like, they're showing up in our church, barefoot, they're ruining the shag carpet. And They're like, this is not what we want in our church. There is not reverence for the Lord here. And there's a scene where there's a line going out like around the block, people trying to get in this church, and they're hippies, they're all barefoot. And Pastor Chuck Smith is sitting at their feet, and he's washing their feet before they come into church. And I was blown away. I was like, Lord, I want to be that. I was just so stunning. Like, that is the heart of Christ, that he would wash his accusers' feet. Like, Lord, I rebuked you. There's no reason why you should love me. There's no reason why you should save me. You should have cast me out a long time ago. And he didn't. Time and time again, he doesn't. And so it's like, Lord, I just want to give you everything. Like, when you love somebody, you just want to give them the world. You know, there's a scene from It's a Wonderful Life. He's like, do you want the moon, Mary? I'll lasso the moon for you. Like, that's the way. It's like, Lord, I just want to give you everything. You know, we talk about surrender. I remember there was a season where the Lord just kept putting surrender in my heart. I'm like, Lord, you want everything? I was like, why? It seems so scary. I'm like, I don't want to give you these things. I'm holding on to him so tightly. And he's like, you can't experience the richness of my love. That's what you want anyway. Get rid of it. Let go of it. And don't you know I would give you something better instead? So I wear these Air Jordan 1s. They're lows. I didn't buy them. Pastor Peter gave them to me. And it was the night of a praise and worship service in the upper room of young adults. I dap him up. He's wearing this LeBron James jersey. It's a black LeBron James jersey. He's got a black hat on. And he's wearing these shoes. They're white, black, and purple. You know how Pastor Peter always looked, you know, fresh every day.
Yep, he
and
did.
I dap him up. I'm like, hey, man, I like the shoes. He's like, do you want them? Like, what? He's like, they're yours. Come see me after service. Come see me after service, and I'll give them to you. And I'm like, all right, bro.
He didn't even say yes. He's just like, you want them? Huh? Yeah, they're yours. Here you go.
I was like, all right. He's like, come see me after service and I'll give them to you. And I get into praise and worship. I'm like, Lord, I am not going up to one of the pastors of our church and asking him for his shoes. I'm not doing that. So if you want me to have these shoes, he needs to come up to me after service. So I'm like, all right. He comes and finds me after service. I'm wearing these beat up slip-on Converse shoes. They used to be white. They're now brown. They're all tattered. And Pastor Peter's like, all right, let's change shoes. You know, because it was raining or something outside. He's like, let's change shoes. And you know what? I hesitated to give up my crappy shoes for these brand new Air Jordans. Not a crease on them. And the Lord is like, you gonna hold on to something old? You're going to hold on to being an old creation rather than the new creation that I've called you to be? It's like, when we live a life of legalism, it's like, you're going to hold on to the promise of a better covenant, not the better covenant itself? Come on, man. Come on. Because here's the thing. It's out of like faithlessness that we do that. Because when you live in the true depth of that revelation of the better covenant, the natural fruit is the works that you're striving for anyway. Like it says, faith without works is dead. Yeah, the works is the natural byproduct of your faith. Like, you're naturally going to be living submitted and surrendered to him. So it was like, oh, it got to that moment of intimacy with the Lord. It was like, oh, when I give you everything, this calls me to greater dependency. Greater dependency yields greater intimacy. I'm like, oh, this is what falling in love with you looks like. This is real trust. Like, that's what a relationship is. That's what a marriage is. It's real trust. That's real commitment. It's like, we're putting all our chips on the table right now. Everything's at the center. There's no pulling back. You don't see that at a casino. All in. Wait. Hold on. You don't see that. When the chips are out there, the chips are out there. And so, man, God is just, he is so wild. He's like, you really gonna hold on to these crappy shoes? You really gonna hold on to a crappy promise? Your little dreams? I want you to dream bigger than that. I want you to expect greater things. Your expectations are this low and you think they're up here. He said, you got no spectrum. You got no idea how this works. Funny thing is, it was like within a week or two, Jordan gives me a pair of his shoes. And I'm like, I'm walking in the house. I'm like, is this just what we're doing in this season? Like, is this the church I go to? And I'm walking in the house. I'm in the garage. I remember I was like, what's going on, Lord? And this is probably in 2022 or 2021. I can't remember when it was. I'm walking in the house. It must have been 2021. And I had no interest in getting into ministry. I'm like, I'm going to make money still. This is before I even thought about working at the City Rescue Mission of Lansing. And God just says, he's like, Nathan, I want you to walk in similar shoes. And I'm like, you're crazy. Close the door, get inside, do whatever I have to do, like make beats and stuff. And I'm like, I just like discarded that word so quickly. I was like, you're wild. Shoots finger guns. And so now I stand here and I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord. Like you've actually like, something Kaylin said a while ago, because I used to discredit myself because I had a messy past. Mm-hmm. Kaylin Townsend said this once. She was like, God doesn't call the qualified, more so he qualifies the called. I was like, I had been disqualifying myself for so long. In the movie Jesus Revolution, they also said this. It was like, Chuck Smith's wife says like, Chuck, are you so arrogant to think that God can't use your failures? I was like, oh my gosh. This whole time I was like, look, I got so selfish about my own testimony. I'm like, oh, my testimony's like for me, you know what I mean? Like to show me how good you've been. No, it's like, no, Nathan, I'm using your story for my glory. Let's get this right now. This ain't about you. It's never been about you. I still love you though. Like when I died on the cross, I was still thinking distinctly about you as I was thinking about every other name. Their name passed through my head and I saw them. But this has never been about you. And as soon as you realize that, as soon as your love isn't focused inward rather it's more outward, that's where it is. Better to give than to receive. We receive his love and then we give it right back.
Where's the Lord taking you now?
Man. So Thursday night, Francis Chan is asking us, it was either Francis Chan or Andy Bird, I can't remember who said, like, ask God for countries, ask God for cities and places. I'm trying to dredge up a country for the life of me. I've been trying to do that for years. I'm like, oh, I think you want me to go here. Like, I think you want me to move south or to Virginia or whatever. Like, and God just put Lansing on my heart. Mm-hmm. Every time I try to get away from here, he's like, nah, I've put this place on your heart. He's like, there's something burning in your heart for your neighborhoods. The places you grew up. He's like, I've given you a love for this city, a love for the people of this city. So often we think of a missions field being somewhere distant and we forsake our backyards. Like, bro, it's funny. We do this thing where, we always talk about like, take the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your brother's. Mm-hmm. The log in your own eye isn't just you. It's the places you live, where you grew up. We're so quick to try and leave the nest. I mean, it doesn't mean like, you don't leave your father and mother. That's not what I'm speaking to. It's like, no, it's like, dude, what about the people you grew up with that are still where you grew up? Like, God is just calling me to places where, I know the ministry will not look glorious to the rest of the world for a while. And it was scary when he showed me that. But when I realized it was for his glory and not mine, and it was humbling, it would be humbling me in the process, I was like, all right, let's do this. Like working at the City Rescue Mission of Lansing, I'm like, all right, Lord, this is where you called me. This is where you called me for this season. it might not look that glorious to the rest of the world, but it'll look glorious to the kingdom. Because I'm in this MBA program where people are getting jobs with Honeywell, GM, Microsoft, and these aren't just like, oh, you're going to type something for 5 hours. It's like, no, you've got some lofty positions. You're working into being a consultant. Like the average like exit, or the average like starting salary for somebody who's an MBA at MSU is like 6 figures. Something like that. It's crazy. Like, you make a ton of money. That's what these people do. Like, an MBA is for the sake of making a career pivot, so that you can make more money. You have a variance of opportunities that you can engage in. Your network expands. You develop a greater skill set as well. So I went into this program thinking like, oh, I'm going to get into consultation work for like underprivileged and underserved communities. And then maybe I'll have some big clients as well. Like that's how I'll pay the bills. I'll still make some good money, but I'll be, serving in a missions capacity, and maybe I'll do that in, some foreign countries as well. And then God was like, is that a me idea, or is that a you idea? Because it sounds like a you idea. Sounds like you just felt like you needed a line to tell your classmates and your professors to make it sound like you knew what you were doing. It's like you had no idea what you were doing when you started this program. All you knew is that I called you to this. Because I originally did not want an MBA, only for the sake of like, well, it'll help me make more money. My mom said, she's like, all right, apply for an MBA. I applied to one MBA program, one grad school. And I was like, Lord, if you want me to be there, you want me to be there. And I'm like, if you don't, I'll apply to other places. But I'm like, I think you want me to be at MSU. If you want me to continue to be a presence at MSU, because for some reason during my undergrad years at MSU, I felt like there was unfinished business. Not in the sense of like, oh, I haven't learned everything I could learn. There was some piece of that. But it's like, I feel like we're not done here. I feel like we're not done. And so God just opened up doors like crazy. Like, boom, got an MBA, or got into the MBA program. Boom, like I got a GA position where I've got my apartment, my meals taken care of. I've got a paycheck. I've got my tuition credit waivers, and I'm overseeing people. Like, I'm in a supervisory role, where I'm literally like opening up the word during my meetings with my RAs and just praying with them. And it's just wild, because I was like, all right, Lord. I remember after I interviewed for this position, so I emailed the people for, REHS, it's Residence Education and Housing Services. My mom let me know about this GA position, because I had originally planned to have a GA, graduate assistantship, as a teaching assistant, for one of my professors during my undergrad years.
So an RA is a student that you are helping teach?
So an RA is a resident assistant. So they usually supervise like the residents of their wing. So each floor of my building has 2 wings, a male and a female wing. So you have a female overseeing a female wing, a male overseeing a male wing. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm touching base with them, like, hey, do you have like roommate agreement set up at the beginning of the year with them? Are you connecting with them via res chats is what we call it. It's engagement, making sure that you're doing wellness checks. Are you creating community events? Usually they need to create 2 community events for their wing per month. Are you planning residential learning modules or models, events? So it's usually based around some sort of pillar or theme, interculturalism, purpose. It's honestly just a bunch of
stuff.
It's just a bunch of fluff, to be real. It's not speaking to the heart of what these kids need. Right. But
you're a supervisor of supervisors for these buildings.
For these residents, yep.
Check.
So originally when I set up my GA, it was going to be like, all right, I'm going to be a teaching assistant for this class with my professor who wrote me a recommendation letter to get into the MBA program. Boom, he lets me know about like early May, or about mid-May, late May. He's like, hey, by the way, this teaching assistant position would not be paid. There's not enough kids in this class for it to be paid. I'm like, poop. Like, darn it. I was like, all right, dude. Thank you anyway. I need it to be paid though. Like, I got to start chipping away at my tuition. I really appreciate it. By then, all GA positions have been filled, and I didn't get offered anything by the MBA program. So my mom was like, all right, reach out to REHS, email them, give them a headshot, let them know who you are, ask them if there's any opportunities, any openings. So I do so. They let me know. They're like, hey, all our positions have been filled. We'll let you know if anything opens up. It's about mid-July. School year's about to start. And I'm like, oh, Lord. I'm like, first of all, I just started getting to the point where I'm like, Lord, it's about time I move out. I love my parents, but as a man, I need to start working towards being a man.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Lord, I need my own place. I need a GA position. Lord, you called me this summer. So at the beginning of the summer, he was like, don't make any music because it's all been all about you, and only work 2 days a week and just seek me first. I'm like, what? I tell my parents this and they're like, okay, the music is fine. You need to work so you can make money so you can save up for your education. I'm like, hey, I know, and I would, but the Lord literally made this very clear. He wants me to read his word, spend time with him, an immense amount of time with him every day, spend time in fellowship, and just spread the gospel everywhere I go. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be obedient to him. So July comes around. My parents have been like, what are you going to do for school? And I'm just praying. I'm like, Lord, show my parents your goodness and how faithful you are when we're obedient to you. I close in prayer. I got tears streaming down my face. Open my email, and there's an email from REHS saying, hey, we have a vacancy. Apply for it right now. So I apply for the vacancy. About about a week later, they're like, hey, we'd like to interview you. When can you interview? I'm like, how about 3 days from now? 3 days from now. Boom. All right, great. So that I interview, it was like 10 a.m. in the morning. I think it was a Thursday when I interviewed them, because I think it was young adults that I, poured it out to a couple friends. Thursday, 10 a.m., interview with them. I go for a walk. I'm like, all right, Lord, if you want me to be there, I trust you that you'll give this position to me. If you don't, then wherever you want me to be is wherever you want me to be. I'm already in this MBA program. Lord, I just trust you. And it was funny. I might not have been able to hear the specific words the two interviewers were saying about me, but I could hear the tone in my spirit. And they were favorable things. Like God was just speaking on my behalf. Next thing I know, 4 p.m. that same day, I get a call and they're offering me the position.
Nice.
And I was like, whoa. They're like, yep, this is really last moment. So you're going to move in like next week. And then the week after that, you're going to begin training. They're like, usually we have people like settle in. Like usually we hire people months in advance, but this just opened up. Like randomly. Not randomly, obviously. That's divine intervention.
Yes, sir.
But it was like, whoa, Lord. And so this whole year has just been about flexing the ministry muscles. Like, all right, how do we share the gospel? How do we usher in the Lord's presence with us in conversations with people? How do we speak life into them? How are we bold in his name? And how do we take him seriously? Like, it's not just great thankfulness. Like, Lord, thank you that I could share the gospel. It's like taking it seriously. Like, that was something God stirred in my heart this week. It was like, whoa, I thought I was taking you seriously. I'm crying. I'm spending time with you every morning because I'm so overjoyed to be in your presence. I'm reading your word. I'm praying with you. I'm praying to you. I'm spending time with you, communing with your spirit throughout the day too. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I was like, it's one of those moments where, I don't know if you have this, like, it's Song of Songs. So the way God describes his bride, who we are, the body of Christ, Song of Songs 6:5, turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. That's the way he looks at us. But like, think about it this way too, like, like when Moses left the presence of the Lord, like he had to, like, the people could barely even look at his face. Not even God himself, somebody who'd been spending time in his presence. So who am I to put my eyes to him? So that was the way it was just like, it was like God took a baseball bat and lovingly smacked me in the chest and knocked the wind out of me. I was like, oh my gosh, Lord, I am so sorry. I thought I was taking the blessings that you've given me like seriously and the gospel serious. I have not been taking it seriously enough. And I'm still sharing the gospel. I'm still doing all these things. You can still be in love with him and still be missing it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, we're always growing. That's what I love when I hear older men who are on fire for the Lord and have that wisdom. They're consumed with zeal for his house, and they're like, I'm still figuring it out. That's what Pastor Richard Crisco said. He's like, I am still figuring it out. That humility, I just thank the Lord. I'm like, Lord, thank you that we got spiritual fathers like that in this church. Like, when people make something accessible to you, in the same heart that God made himself accessible to us through Jesus Christ's sacrifice, oh my gosh, it just like, it opens your eyes. It's like you can see life differently. Like when somebody talks about their marriage with you in a very vulnerable and open way. So Justin Reed, who runs Project 111, which is a Christian songwriting collective, he always makes his marriage accessible to myself, Michael Simpson, and James Dool, in the sense of like, he's just like, hey, this is where we are. This is what we're doing great, and this is what we're working on, and where we're kind of struggling. He said, but this is where God is in all of this. He is so vulnerable in a way that it is immense strength. It blows me away. He is so easy to want to honor because of that. He is so vulnerable before us, where I'm like, that is a man worthy of honor. When people talk to you about like what it's like to raise children, and you don't got those helicopter parents, like they allow you to like just like laugh with their kid, like my supervisor, like like today, I put my finger down, and his son like grabbed my finger, and his son's about to be 2 years old. And his son will give me like high fives, and like somebody who does that to you, it's like, oh, like that. I always used to say this to people. I'm like, kids and like little kids and dogs seem like good judges of character. So when they don't like you, it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on with me? So when people open their hearts and their lives to you, whether they're following God or not, it's like, that is like what God does to us, even when we're so unworthy. So yeah, this is a season of where like, Lord, I just want to never take myself too seriously, but I want to take you as seriously as possible. Like reverence is the thing that I see out of you, Aaron. Something I said to you, like it was a young adults night, and it was the men's panel, and there's a lot of laughing in the room, and I love that. I love how we don't take ourselves too seriously, but you said something that was said with such great reverence for the Lord, and it was like the room missed it. And it stirred something in my heart. I was like, ooh. And I remember I talked to you afterwards, and I said, Aaron, we need more men like you in the church who have reverence for him. Wild reverence. Not in the sense of legalism, because you're still that young boy right before the Lord, dancing in his presence like King David. Like I'm like, I remember the first time I met you, I'm like, why is this dude staring at me like this? I'm like, hold on.
I apologize. I do not remember when we first met. When would this have been?
I don't remember our first conversation. I just remember what I was thinking when I met you. I'm like, this dude is staring into my soul.
I get that a lot.
I was like, this dude is I'm like, this is an intense stare. Turn your eyes away from me. They overwhelm me. You and Reed, I was like, man, these dudes just staring at my soul, bro. Like, stop it, man. You're making me uncomfortable. And you know what it was? I mentioned this to a friend last night. I was like, Aaron and Reed operate out of communion with the Spirit. And so they're looking at you like the Father looks at you. And they're measuring what to share with you in those moments, because I'm like, I already know the Lord is speaking to you about something that's going on in me. And you're trying to measure whether you should share that and offend for the sake of showing love, or whether it'll harm. Because the word is offensive. It's a double-edged sword.
Yes, it is.
You're not just defending, you're attacking. It pierces through. So you're always, I was like, oh, that's what he's doing. He's measuring, like, all right, Spirit's telling me this. Should I share this with you right now? Would this harm you, or would this draw you nearer to him? Are you ready to receive something like that? Billy Burke, he used to have all these healing services at our church, at Mount Hope Church. He's this guy with platinum blonde hair. He's got a mustache, southern twang, right out of the book of like Catherine Kuhlman, that kind of preacher.
Yep.
Wild services. I mean, you're seeing people get out of wheelchairs. You're seeing people being healed of seizures. You're seeing people being healed of cancer. Crazy things. You couldn't even explain it. I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. And he's speaking to things that are going on in people's lives that are very, very like, like sensitive. It's like, yo, I remember sitting as like 10 or 12 or something, sitting in service, and I am struck with fear. I'm like, Lord, please do not tell him what's going on in my life right now. Because if he does, I'm going to be so embarrassed. And so all that to be said, like, I remember seeing that, and I was like, this guy's intense. Like, what is this guy's deal? And then I saw you dance before the Lord, and I'm like, I get this guy now. I get it. Like, the reverence for the Lord, I'm like, that makes sense. This isn't a show of like, look at me, I'm so disciplined and I follow all the rules of the Lord. And it's like, no, he is just madly in love with the Lord. And reverence is flowing out of him as if he were a river. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. It's like lingering in the presence of the Lord. It's like, are we going to address him so casually? Like, hey, bro. Like, no, this is the King of Kings. When we prayed earlier, you said King Jesus. Like, he is sitting on the throne. I still can't wrap my mind around that. He is sitting on the throne, bro. And it's like, would you spend time in his presence and then so casually leave it like, all right, I'm going to go play video games right now? Or would you linger? The services that have no end time, not saying like, hey, if your service has an end time, you're probably not spending time with the Lord. Like, not to get into that legalism, but it's like, no, the services where it was like, there just seemed to be no end time. Like, no one cared about like when we had to go home. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. That was when the Spirit started moving, bro. I was like, oh my gosh. When you start to see older people like totally give up their schedules, going to Dimitri's right after service, going to Cheddar's right after service. Like, you saw them give up their lunch plans. Like, whew. Like, when we start to let God interrupt our plans and our lives, oh, that's when it gets exciting.
Yes, sir.
That's what I think Asbury, is that the town in Kentucky?
I think it's a college that's out in Kentucky.
But that's what that is.
Yeah.
It was a service that just kept going. It's like, shoot, man, I asked myself, I'm like, would I even be that willing to just stay in a church for days? Call my boss, say, hey, I can't leave church right now because the presence of the Lord is here, and I'd rather be here than work. Like, am I willing to be that sold out? Like, man, it's wild. It's wild. That kind of reverence. It's like, where else are we going to go? You got people coming from other states just to get a taste. I mean, shoot, like, that's, you can't put a price on that. People are looking to put a price on that. That's what business is, man. That's what all these businesses are trying to do. They're trying to sell you something. They're trying to put a price on your peace, your joy, trying to profit off that. And there's nothing wrong with running a business. I'm not here to like vilify capitalism. I believe in capitalism. I believe in Jesus Christ. And I also believe in capitalism. Like, capitalism is good. That is what God has intended in many ways. Now, is that what the kingdom looks like? I don't know. I just know it's a feasible economic system, and I trust it. We're not going to get into the weeds with that. But all that goes to say is, like, the world would chase this with everything they have. Mm-hmm. So we who know him, why are we taking this so casually? So reverence, man. reverence. That's something I see in you, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, it's special. Reverence paired with a radical, childlike love.
Agreed. Yeah. 2022 was really a year that the Lord spent a lot of time impressing upon me, because I've always had some level of obedience to the Lord throughout my whole life, but that was the year that He gave me a greater depth of understanding why we need reverence, why it's important. And then towards the end of the year, I was like, I was starting to get like, how would I put this? I won't say that I fell out of love, because I haven't, but I would get very worried about circumstances in my life. And I was like, there's something wrong here, because I'm not trusting that the Lord's going to handle it. Because there is that tension. Jordan talks all the time about living in the tension between two things that are seemingly opposite but are both true. Well, we need to have reverence and we need to have love. We need to have reverence so that we recognize and we remain humble. We recognize that the Lord we don't deserve what the Lord's given us. But we need that love so that we will still approach His throne.
Yeah.
So that we'll still want to linger with Him, even though He is a holy God and His wrath is good and His judgments are good.
He's a God who's bigger than our situations. Jordan has said that before. He's like, if you're getting so stressed out and anxious about something, he's like, your situations just became bigger than who your God is. Like, ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's real. It's real. And it's so funny. It's something, it can be just such a quick, misdirected gaze. Just for a moment. Oh, wait a minute. It's like looking to the left and He was right in front of you. And then you just you miss the fullness of who He is, because your gaze just totally just shifted elsewhere. It's that's why He's got to be our first focus. I don't want to replace Him with anybody else. That does not work. It will leave me dry.
Yeah.
There's a scene I just watched the Jesus Revolution movie, and I was bawling my eyes out like a kid in that movie. There was a scene where one of the guys, he's going to church because this girl invites him, and he starts crying because he's people are praying over this man in a wheelchair. He's feeling the presence of the Lord. It's this thing that he's been looking for every time. And he leaves the church, and the girl runs after him. She's like, where are you going? Give this a chance. She's like, this is what you've been looking for. And he's like, yeah, and that's what I'm afraid of. He's like, I'm afraid this is just another high. He's like, I can't be let down again. He's like, I can't be let down again. She's like, let's just pursue this together and see what happens. He was afraid. He's like, what if I'm let down again? What if this runs out? What if it runs dry? That's the prayer that I pray. I'm like, Lord, keep my lamp burning. And it that's what it says in Psalms. I just read that this morning. You, Lord, it's Psalms 18:28. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. In Leviticus it talks about keep the altar of your life burning. So in the sense of constantly living a life of sacrifice and surrender. It's all right, Lord, but how do I keep burning? This, it can't be on me, because I'm not enough. I'm gonna seek you. That's my, I'm gonna consistently be intentional about seeking you, about choosing you, but I need you even to seek you and to want to seek you. I can only love Him because He loved me first. I am unable to love Him except that He loved me first. Now I am able, because His love lives inside of me. Yeah. So to keep my life, my heart burning, I'm like, Lord, I always want to be burning for you. I always want to be burning for you. I never want to run out of love for you. Never. I'm I need you. I need you. Oh, how I need you. And he's faithful to keep that lamp burning. Like, he is faithful to keep us reverent, even when we like shift our gaze for a moment, even when we get worried, like, oh my gosh, am I falling out of love? Like, it's like, if you'll come before him, like it says, a broken and contrite heart he does not despise. If you'll come before him broken, like, all right, Lord, something's wrong, something's off, I need you, he'll work with that time and time again. That's clay that's malleable.
Yeah.
Clay that's malleable can be shaped.
Yes, sir.
And something that can be shaped can be put in the kiln. And when it comes out, you can use it. Mm-hmm. You can use it to be filled up and to provide nourishment for others. Like, you need it. Like Jordan has talked about this, being a container for his blessings, for his presence in your life. That's what that looks like, man. Being malleable clay, being shaped, being willing to be thrown into the consuming fire that he is for the sake of purification. Then when you come out and you're ready, shoot, you're a container. That living water, it's not going anywhere, because he is a trustworthy potter. You're not going to be leaking. Don't worry. You're not going to be leaking. And now you're going to be able to provide that nourishment to other people. Not because of who you are, but because he's done that work, that you may look like that you may be that container. And now he's put that inside of you. You did nothing, bro. You did nothing.
You baked, and that's about it.
You baked. Like a cookie, man. Like a cookie.
Why don't we take a break?
Yeah.
All right, so after that super long break, I want to talk to you about Christians in art. You make music, and I want to talk to you about, what it looks like for Christians to be in the art space, how we can do that well. Tell us a little bit first about the kind of music that you make and what its purpose is.
Yeah. So my music is, primarily rap, R&B in nature. So I sample a lot of like old records, whether that be from the 70s, 80s. I like doo-wop, honestly, like sampling doo-wop. So, like the approach that I take to producing my music is like, I'll take a sample and I really try to draw out like moments in the songs where I can like either loop it or I can chop it up. And then from there, it's like figuring out like, hey, am I going to mix the drums in this sample that already exists? Try and make it come forward a little bit more, or am I going to add my own drums, and then figuring out how am I going to layer it from there, and then create song structure. So obviously there's a sample clearance aspect to it, but that's really the music that I make. I don't know, it's really tying upon themes of like nostalgia and childhood, because I grew up listening to music like that. So really what I was always trying to speak to in my music, even before I came to the Lord, was like, it was speaking to like that feeling of home. Like, we're all looking for home. We're all looking for a place or a person or a thing that we can call home. And I just had this conversation with somebody recently. The way I was like, one of my friends, the way they talk about the Lord is, it just feels like home. And I'm like, there's something so distinctly homely and cozy about the way you talk about the Lord. And I just remember, I'm like, I wanted, like, eternity is written on every heart. And so I wanted to tie in those themes of like home and eternity into my music. Like, I wanted like my music to capture this feeling of forever. I guess like this is just an abstract way to describe it, is like, so Eric Little, who was a gold medalist, he was an Olympian. He ran the 400 meter, I think it was the 1924 Paris Olympics, and he was also a missionary later in his life. So his family, he grew up in a family of missionaries. They had been missionaries in China. Then the Boxer Rebellion took place, which was basically like It was a huge movement in China where they tried to basically push out any foreign influences. So, missionaries, Christians were really just forced out of the country, honestly, through a lot of violent means. So the Little family, moved back to Scotland where they were from. And Eric Little just like excelled in all these different athletics, rugby, track and field, and eventually just dedicated the latter half of his life to becoming a missionary in occupied China, and actually died in a internment camp under, like, I think it was like the Japanese or something like that. And so one thing he said to his, there's a movie, Chariots of Fire. It was produced in 1981, released in 1981. And one thing he says in the movie is like, he's saying it to his sister, Jenny. And he's like, when I run, I feel God's glory. And immediately, like, what that brought to mind is like Elijah, like racing King Ahab and like beating King Ahab. I'm like, the glory that Elijah must have experienced, like within himself, like that's in himself. He's experiencing that manifest in his own flesh, and then he's taken up in this chariot of fire. I'm like, what glory that must be. And so that's the glory that I was always seeking in my music. And originally it was all about myself. My music, oh my gosh, when I listen to my earlier music, it is so embarrassing. It is so embarrassing. It's a lot of vulgar music. So I started writing songs when I was about 6 years old. And I remember the first song that I made, it was called It's a Party. I remember I wrote it at my dinner, at the dining room table. And I'd make up songs when I was a kid. And then when I was 12, I started like rapping in front of people at school and performing at like school assemblies. And then about when I was 18, my friend and I, we went in together to just buy some like recording equipment. And we're like, man, we're just going to drop a fire mixtape, bro. Like, we were those guys. Like, man, we're just going to we're going to smoke a ton of weed, drop a fire mixtape, make a ton of money and tour the world and just reel in the babes. Like, we were just a couple of like just dumb young kids who were just seeking our own glory. I listened to the stuff that I made before, and I'm like, who do you think you are, man? Like, you weren't living that life. Who do you think you are? I'm just talking about like money and drugs, and it wasn't original at all. There's no creativity in it, even though that's what we thought we were doing. And so I eventually came to the Lord, and the Lord just like really convicted me, like, clean up your music, man. Like, really clean up your music. I've already given you an amazing testimony, and you're not even going to share it. You're going to try and speak somebody else's story, not the story I've given you to declare my glory. Start speaking about that. And again, it was still me, like, my testimony was still about me. It wasn't about what he did in me. It was about me. And so I was still trying to like figure out how to like make concessions. Like, oh, I still, I can still talk about like, weed and stuff like that and like getting high. And I just remember, I remember like how shallow my music was. I remember just no one was vibing with it either. I was like, oh, because this makes no sense. This music makes no sense. Like, we have to be so careful about making concessions as Christians. In Isaiah, it talks about, this is like one of the verses that God gave me when I like started my graduate program. It was, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. That's Isaiah 7:9. And yeah, it's also the same chapter where it says, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel. But it was like, if you will not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. And I was like, ooh, yeah, I can't make concessions anymore. There's no peace in this if I'm making music that's all about myself. And even when I started to clean up my music, I stopped talking about drugs. I was kind of making like love songs and like making, songs about my testimony. I was slapping God's name on my songs like it was a sticker. So I have the seal of approval. And I remember God just saying, like, last summer, he's like, give up music for a season. And I was like, he just said give up music. And I'm like, oh, like for a season or forever? because I was like, it almost seemed like it might be forever. I'm like, it came to the point where I had so much peace where I'm like, I might give this up forever. And I'm like, if it's for him, that's what I want. I remember telling my mom that, and she's like, well, I'm glad you finally came to that conclusion. She said, Nathan, your music has been about you from day one. She's like, I have prayed about this. She said, I almost told you that your music is all about you. She said, but you would have taken that poorly. She said, you would have been mad at me. She said, but Nathan, she's like, I know. She said, you've been slapping God's name on your music like it was a sticker. Mm. And because I even had songs that were like, you know, I didn't swear in them. I didn't talk about doing drugs. I just talked about how God had saved me. But the heart of it was still for my own glory.
So you're the guy that Adam's talking about in this song, Christian Rap is a Joke.
Yeah. Dude, absolutely. It hurt me. I was like, hey, man, you trying to diss me out here, bro? Like, but it's real. It's real. It was all about me. My music was all about me. Every beat was for my own glory. It was me trying to build up my own kingdom and not his. And that's still something God checks me on. Like, when it comes to making music, it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't care if I ever release music in my own lifetime. Because I dropped like, you know, a single when I was in high school, and I dropped like an EP for a little while and another single, you know, in my late teens, early 20s. And then I, you know, took it off of SoundCloud, and since then I've never dropped any music, even though my music is, you know, clean, and I just haven't felt released to do that. I might drop a single this summer, but you know, that's if the Lord is like really confirming that along the way, because for me it was just like always checking like, ooh, what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? Is this for me or is this for him? Mm-hmm. And really it's just like appreciating the gift. Like, Lord, like as a kid, I remember burning inside because I was like, oh, I just want to make music, dude. I want to be able to make, like, I remember watching like cartoons when I was a kid. There's this one, it's made by Hanna-Barbera. They're the same producers who created the Flintstones and I believe the Jetsons. So it's a similar animation style. Yep. And it was called The Greatest Adventure Stories of the Bible. And it was about these three people. One was a nomad. His name was Moki. And what was it? It was two archaeologists, Derek and Margot. And they found themselves going through this like doorway of time because they were like digging at an archaeological site. They fell through to this like this temple or whatever, and they go into this door and they experience all these Bible stories, and they're like sound like biblical stories. And the score of the cartoon was so interesting to me, and I remember like it welled something up in me. I remember like rewinding like the credit scene. It was like the cartoon Joseph. And I remember rewinding it over and over and over and over for hours and hours. Because I'm like, where can I find this song? Like, where can I listen to this song? I want to take this song with me. And I didn't even know what sampling was when I was a child, but I knew I wanted to do that. I'm like, I want to take sections of a song that I really enjoy and just make them live on forever and make a song around that. And it's funny, I just like was reflecting upon that this past year. I'm like, Lord, thank you that you would give me a gift that you know matters so much to me. And it really probably doesn't matter that much to you, but you love me enough that you would give me something that you know that I've been burning in my heart as a child to make music. Like the fact that I can even listen to music that I've made the beat. I honestly should say like God made that through me. Really, like God made that beat through me. God made that the lyrics through me. Like God was able to produce everything and mix everything through me. Like that's eerie. I'm like, Lord, if that's all I ever get out of this, it's enough. Because 12-year-old Nathan, 6-year-old Nathan would just be to the moon that he was able to make a song and listen to it, and that it would sound good enough to where he'd like it. So really it's just thanking the Lord for gifts and just asking him like, Lord, what do you want to do with these gifts? In this season, I really think it's just been speaking life into other artists, really. And, we have a drummer at our church. He's 16 years old, Zeb. Yep. And he is incredibly talented. I mean, he can play the drums, he can play the guitar, he can play bass. I mean, he he comes up with incredible riffs that we've created songs around. And so just speaking life into him, being like a positive influence, kind of like not warning him of the pitfalls, but just sharing with him. You know, it's not wagging your finger at the younger generation. It's like, hey man, this is what didn't work for me. But when God was at the heart of this, that was when I found peace. It was when my music started to make sense. Because artists, we love chasing these lofty ideals. We love concept albums. We love being storytellers. We love, I mean, Pastor Richard Crisco said this, as preachers, like, we have to remember that our audiences don't necessarily remember what we said. They remember how we made them feel. And so that's something that, like, artists, we get a little bit too caught up into the feeling sometimes. And it's important to understand that, like, faith is more than a feeling. Mm-hmm. And so our artwork has to be more than a feeling. We have to be very intentional to check our feelings at the door, because they can lie to us. You know, we can feel his presence as if it were tangible, but it's like, all right, how do we balance that? So it's kind of speaking to that with Zeb, like, really encouraging his creativity, never trying to like let that dim, but like speaking life into that, because you never want to do that for the generation. It's like, you know, I'm always telling you, like, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right. It's like, no, this is what you're doing. Like, for me, it's like, dude, you have the ability to make a living off of this, and you are making songs right now as a 16-year-old that can speak to adults. I'm like, you're coming up with lyrics that speak to my heart. God has given you a gift, bro. So just seek him. And it's being able to speak life into that. It's, you know, guys like Jack at our church, who are, you know, multi-instrumentalists, and you know, they also produce, and they're getting into the business side of it. It's like, it's providing them the advice that I have, because I'm somebody who, I've interned at a music studio before. Mm-hmm. I have my own LLC. I kind of understand what that streaming, what streaming looks like, and what sample clearance looks like. I kind of understand the business idea, or business side of it, how to negotiate, how to communicate in a professional environment, because I've worked in retail banking for 5+ years. So I kind of understand professional settings, whereas, you know, they're younger, they might not have had more experience in that. So it's not that they're not wise, it's just they don't have that experience. Yeah. So it's just sharing those experiences with them. Like, it's not that I'm this, you know, wise man. It's just like, no, this is what I have to give. And if you want that, you can have it. Like, this is what I'm going to share with you. This is what worked for me. This is what didn't work for me. It's also just helping people connect in, you know, the creative world. So for me, it was always like, if a Christian artist came to me and they wanted to know what studio they should go to or who they should work with, boom, this is who I'll tell you. Like, you should go to. They're spirit-filled. That was always the primary goal. Are they spirit-filled, and are they excellent at what they do? Mm. Because usually the price will be in line. Like, it'll be affordable. Yeah. Because working at a studio where we also worked with secular artists, I myself, you know, kind of tried to stray away from that, and eventually just wouldn't do it at all. There's an environment, a spiritual environment, that I became less and less comfortable with inviting Christians into, because there's the knowledge of, like, this is a battleground, and I'm not sure this is the setting where you want to create your song, where you really want to keep your eyes on him. I don't know if you want to fight, whereas right now you just want to praise. So I just kind of make them cognizant of that. I love, and I have nothing but the best to say about my CEO, or the CEO of that label that I worked at, and just a godly, loving man. Just learned, I think, what I wanted out of music, and what I wanted out of working in music. So it was just an invaluable experience, and I'm just, like, really grateful that he would give me that opportunity, because now I have that experience to share with other people who are looking to be in that space long term, and God has most likely called them to that. I don't know if God has called me to stay within the music space, the creative space, that way. I think, you know, authorship, like, you know, writing books, I think that might be something that God has in store for me. feel like he's kind of been speaking that into me this season. Like, honestly, I've heard it from multiple people, so I haven't been taking much stock into it because I'm like, oh yeah, I like that, that's what I'll do, but there might be something there. I don't know what my involvement looks like in creative spaces. I just know God has called me to it in some manner and fashion, and I just want it to be completely submitted to him and about him and not about me. It's got to be for his glory, because that's where it's most glorious. Like, men especially, we want to be great at something. Like, we were designed in his image as creatives. Like, we were designed to be creative. We were designed to be great and desire greatness. Like, we're made in his image. That is part of what a man is. So it's not wrong to want to be great, but it's like, what's the heart of that? So it's like, okay, Lord, when I seek to give you the glory, that's the most glorious thing I can do. That's the greatest thing that I can do. And that's fulfilling. It says he satisfies the desires of our hearts with good things. That's when he satisfies that desire in our heart to be great. Mm-hmm. So when I started doing that, it was like, oh, I understand what my music is. I understand what my art is. It's a conversation between me and you. Like, that was literally what I realized. I'm like, oh Lord, some of these songs, some of these poems, some of these beats, it's never meant for another human eye or another human ear. It's just between me and you. This is like my personal praise and worship to you right now. Like, this is us working things out together. And it was amazing. In seasons prior, God had also just like put this in my heart. He's like, Nathan, what if you're never supposed to experience the satisfaction of like your music being received well in your lifetime? Like, what if this is for generations to come? And I'm like, it just changes the way you look at what you're doing. Like, is this for me or for him? That was constantly the dialogue, inner and between him and I. Is this about me or is this about God?
Yeah. This is a little off topic, but we'll go down this rabbit trail. I have never liked rap. And so, what is it about rap, as a person who enjoys it and has made it, what is it about rap that makes people like it so much? Because I've never understood that.
You know, it's funny. I actually don't even like listen to rap music anymore. As somebody who made it, I don't even listen to it. It's the spirit of rap music. Like, even Christian rap music. You know, Adam was talking about that. Mm-hmm. It's off. It's still a lot of it's self-seeking. It's trying to appeal too much to culture instead of to God. I think the one thing that my friends and I always enjoyed about rap music was it was uninhibited. It was this facade of freedom within it. Like,
what do you mean? What do you mean?
Like, whatever I want to do, I'm doing it.
Okay, so that's what it's making you feel like you can do.
Yeah, because that's what those guys were speaking to. Mm-hmm. Like, it was like, you think about guys like Jay-Z, it was like, man, this guy went from being like really, really impoverished, like selling drugs, having run-ins with the law, to now he's a billionaire. Like, that like, it made you think like anything was possible. That's what it really spoke to. And it was also this idea of control. These guys were in control. They had some sort of control over their lives. They had some sort of control over people. When you're a young man, I don't know about you, but personally, I wanted power and influence. And that kind of speaks to control. Like, that kind of speaks to freedom. But there's no freedom if you're running the show. Like, that's not the way it's supposed to go. Like, Paul took great pride in his chains of Christ.
Yeah.
The way I thought about it is like being a slave to sin. Like, when you're wearing those chains that are sin, like, it's funny, like, rap music is basically like bragging. It's like, look at how I'm shining. I'm living in sin, but I'm shining, right? But when you're chained to Christ, it doesn't look as glossy and as polished to the world as the sin does. And so when you're just looking at the outward appearance instead of the inward, like, you just completely miss it. Because you're so susceptible, you're so gullible at a young age, or at least our generation has been. I believe, one thing we spoke to earlier, and there's the power of life and death in the tongue. So I just want to be very intentional about what I say. I think we're seeing a generation that's just not taking things at face value anymore. They're asking questions. Like they're really the Lord is just giving these kids the spirit of discernment, to discern the real from the fake. Like, this is a time where, like, he is separating the wheat from the chaff. And so, really all that's to say, like, I think one thing too is rap music, especially for, like, my generation, really what it spoke to was, like, our childhoods. It always was, like, tying into that nostalgia aspect of, like, it was the references. Rap music is very heavy in the sense of, what is it? Similes and metaphors. You're tying to different cultural points in the sense of, like, sports. So if you really enjoyed, like, basketball growing up, or football or baseball, it would speak to that. There's something weird about, like, certain restaurants that you go up to, like, it was kind of speaking to, like, those places, those times. I don't know. It was just I don't know. I just grew up, and a lot of my friends, like, I remember, I can't remember what his name was. I think his name was Deontay. And I was probably 3 or 4. I was going to this place called Hope Academy. It's long since closed down. And remember, it was just the friends that I gravitated to growing up, where he's like, hey man, do you want a do-rag? And I'm like, I gotta ask my mom first. And my mom was like, what do you need a do-rag for? She said, boy, you do not have hair for that. But it was just like, there was some sort of image it was just like, this is what it looks like to be cool. And at the heart of it, it's like, some people are like, man, I'm just trying to be cool out here. I'm just trying to chill, man. Like, for me, it was like, yeah, like, I want to drive a caddy. Like, I want it to be shining. Like, I want platinum rims. I want a big gold chain, like the cross necklace. I want tattoos. Like, I want to be, like, looking fresh. I want the nicest shoes. And really, at the heart of it is like, you're trying to fill that void of acceptance. You just want to be accepted. Again, it just goes down to, you want to be loved. So, I don't know. That's just what rap music goes about, trying to be. Rap music goes about searching for love in a tough way. I want to be loved, bro. Like, it's trying to say, like, I want to be loved, but in a tough way.
I see.
But, like, I want to be loved, but I'm cool. Like, that's really what they're saying. Like, oh, God has stirred this in my heart. He's like, why are you trying to act too cool for school? Just receive the love that I want to give you. Like, stop trying to create the love that you think you should accept or receive or deserve or whatever the heck. And just receive my love. Sometimes it's not understand. Sometimes it's like, you don't have to figure it out all the time. Just receive that love. There's something, like, human beings, we have this tendency to make things complicated because we think that makes us wise. And the gospel is very simple. It's very simple, very clear. We serve an intricate, not complex God.
Yes.
He is very simple with who he is, but he's magnificent. And so often we see simple, we think of, like, simpleton, or we give it some negative connotation or association, but it's not that. It's like, no, he's simple, because we like things that we can. I mean, I had this conversation with, I can't remember, I think it was Jordan. It's like, why some people love Donald Trump. What you see is what you get. Like, people like a straight shooter. That's why I voted for him. I'm like, this is a straight shooter. Also, what came down the end of the day is like, all right, he doesn't support the killing of babies.
Yeah.
Well, let's call a spade a spade. When we call a spade, like, there's so much peace and just, like, stepping out in truth, saying it for what it is, and letting it hang out there. And that's just what appeals to me about the gospel. And that's what God has constantly told me. He's like, Keep your faith simple. Make it simple and make it accessible for people. In Matthew 23, what Jesus says, and this is kind of speaking to legalism, but I think this also just fits to what I'm speaking to right now, is Matthew 23:13 says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to." Like, we're not supposed to make the gospel some lofty, unattainable thing. He literally tore the veil. That's what he came here to do.
Yeah.
So, who are we to make him inaccessible? So I don't know, that just kind of like veered off of the hip hop conversation, but rap music always just spoke about being like, oh, you can't access my heart. I'm too cool for it, but I want love. Like, it's so weird. It's so weird. No, I'm cool and I'm accepted, but I don't accept myself, and the people around me don't even love me. Like, what, bro? But for some reason, you just buy into it. It's weird. It's so weird.
Yeah. I concur. I think that, for me, the thing that I never really liked about rap was that when I heard it, I mean, most of it was just like vulgar, so I was like,
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't want to hear that. But also, I think some of it has to do with probably mostly that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be more complex than that, but no. Probably mostly just every time I heard a rap song, I was like, this is just, they're promoting garbage.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
You know what my dad said once, and it changed the way I looked at rap music? We were going for a drive. My mom, like, I used to have playlists, like, all right, this is the playlist I play around my family, and then this is my playlist. So, like, if I play oldies around my parents, like, they'll be fine, like, they won't be mad about it. My dad was like, more like, he's like, hey, like, I'm interested in what you're interested in because I'm interested in you. So I want to know what you listen to. He's like, so you can play your rap music around me. He said, I might ask you to change the song every now and then if it's like too vulgar for me. He's like, but I just want you to know, like, I love you for who you are. He's like, I might not love some of the things that you're in, but I love you for who you are. And I don't want you to feel like you have to hide that.
Yeah.
And so I remember we're going for a drive and I'm playing on my music, and my dad was like, can you please change the song? And because they were saying, they were using God's name in vain. Like, I was so numb to it, I didn't even hear it. Like, I didn't even hear it at one point in my life because I was like, I was so numb to it. It didn't mean anything to me. And, which is just wild and scary. And I remember my dad saying, like, can you please change the song? He's like, I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, actually, can you just turn it off? So I turn it off, and my dad's like, the beat sounded nice, and the person's voice, like, it has a nice, like, timbre, it has a nice quality to it. He said, but the lyrics are absolutely awful. He's like, what? He's like, I just want to ask you this. What would if your future wife was sitting in this car right now, what would your future wife think about you if she heard you playing this music and you listening to this music? What would this say about who you are? That you co-sign this message? So, because that's what you're saying. You co-sign what they're saying by listening to it. My dad didn't use the word covenant, but I think it's an important word to use. In some sense, like, you're joining into a covenant by listening, opening your heart and spirit to that music.
Absolutely.
And so my dad was like, what would you want your kids to think about you by the music that you listen to? What would you want your grandma to think about you? It kind of felt like he was throwing some guilt and shame my way, but it was like, no, it was convicting me. And that was the heart of what my dad was trying to do. It wasn't to condemn me. It was to convict me, to call me higher.
Yeah.
Which, again, is just embodying who Christ is. And so it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, what do I want my music to say about me? The music that I listen to, the entertainment I engage in, the books that I read, the games that I play, the people I hang out with, it just all of a sudden just stirred up intentionality in me.
Yep.
And so now I don't even listen to rap music. I'm also careful about, I love R&B music. Like I told you, I love oldies. But I'm even intentional about that because that can, like, I don't listen to sad songs. Like, I just don't want to. I don't want to join with that and wallow in sorrow and pity, self-pity. Like, it's just gross. It's really gross. I also don't want to listen to too many love songs that are not the love songs. Like, I don't want to listen to love songs about some girl and like, dude, because then you become consumed with that. Your heart becomes consumed by like what you feed your ears is what you feed your heart, is what you feed your spirit. So if you're feeding yourself junk food, expect to be unhealthy in your spirit.
Yes. This is a great segue.
Yeah.
This is one of the things I wanted to talk about. In this, there are two pathways in my mind that this diverges. Christians making art and Christians approaching art.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Christians approaching art. When I was very young, my parents, I don't even know if it was my parents that said this. No, it was a disc that my mother had purchased when she went to a convention for homeschoolers. Because I was homeschooled. So she went to a homeschool convention, and there were a lot of speakers. And there was a guy there named John Stone Street who talked about culture. And he talked about movies, and he talked about art, and how we as Christians should engage with that. And one of the things that he said is that whatever you put into your mind is what's going to come out.
Absolutely.
And I had heard that when I was very young, and I took it very seriously. And I still think that that is the case. And this goes to, as you were saying, everything that you consume, what you read, what you listen to, what you watch, what you play. All these things are going inside of you. You're thinking about them.
Yeah.
Your heart is dwelling on them. So we need to be intentional about what we watch, about what we allow ourselves to be in the presence of it, especially when you think about this in terms of being a husband and a father. What you're allowing into the home will affect your wife.
Yeah.
It will affect your children. I mean, just recently, Anna and I were sitting on the couch, and she wanted to watch a show, and so she picked a show, and it was just terrible. And I said, we were only, a couple episodes in, and I was like, we're not watching this anymore. I don't care. This is garbage. I don't care if it's the best story in the world. They're showing us garbage, and I don't want to grieve the Spirit. I want the Spirit to take up residence in my home.
Come on now.
And this grieves Him. We're not going to let this play in our home. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Because you're taking charge, man. Like, that's what you're like. You are the priest of this household.
Yes.
And so, oh man, that's why it's like, God has made this clear to me. He's like, Nathan, you're fighting battles for your children right now that your children won't have to fight. So if we get these battles fought and won, your children won't have to worry about fighting those same battles. That's why it's like, dude, before you have a family, you got to win the battle over pornography in your life.
Yes, you do.
Like, you can't bring that junk into your household, because that spiritual climate will affect your children. The way that you look at women, it'll affect your children. What you watch, what you listen to, it'll affect your children. It'll affect your wife, because you are the head of the household. So everything trickles down.
Whatever you allow has become acceptable in the home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why, when it comes to, it just comes to like setting up good guidelines, good boundaries in your life. Something Pastor Joe and I just always talked about is like, he doesn't allow his kids to have social media up until a certain age. And they've honestly just reached the age where they're not even interested in it. And so, and because of that, they never struggled with lust. It's like, dude, social media is garbage. I'm going to sound like the old man here to society. I don't even care. Social media is garbage. Get off it. There's nothing for you there. If you want to connect with people, give them a call.
Yes, sir.
Go meet with them in person. Look them eye to eye. Have a real conversation. If you like a girl and you've got that lust taken care of in your life, you're living in alignment with His word and perfect will, and He's released you to do that, talk to her like a normal person and develop a friendship that way.
Yeah.
Be real about it. Because if you can't be real in front of her, you got to measure what your true intentions are. So, movies too, it's like, I don't watch anything that's R-rated. I don't watch, like, I actually put parent controls on my, streaming services.
Nice.
I put parent controls on my Apple Music, so I don't listen to anything explicit. I don't listen to anything with swear words. Even like YouTube clips, as soon as it starts getting vulgar, like, nope, not listening to this. It's gross. It's gross. It's like, I'm not a big fan of cheeses because, like, you get that aftertaste in your sinuses, and that's the feeling. Not even just when I'm watching it, but afterwards. If I watch something where people are just swearing left and right, I'm like, ooh, something doesn't sit right. I'm like, there's a funk here.
Yeah.
And I don't want this in my household, in my heart. So I only watch like PG movies. There's even PG-13 movies where I've just turned them off. I'm like, this is stupid. This is bad. Yeah, it was a movie yesterday on Hulu. I had never watched Just Go With It. It was an Adam Sandler movie. And I'm like, I'm just going to turn this on while I'm doing some homework. And it got to a point in the movie, I'm like, this is just stupid. This is not worth my time, my energy. I don't want this on my TV anymore. This is not worth finishing. It wasn't even that. It was just also a stupid movie. It had nothing to do with that, but it was just also like, I don't want this. And so now it's like, honestly, most of the movies that I watch, it's either G or PG. Because I'm like, what are the movies that I'm going to see with my kids anyway? G or PG? I'm not taking my kids to some R-rated movie. I'm not letting my kid watch some TV-14 or TV mature show. No way.
Yeah.
I'm not letting my kids run free on the internet. I'm putting controls on there. And if I don't put controls on my life, that's just a double standard. Well, Dad, you watch whatever you want.
Yeah.
What are you going to say to that? What are you going to say to that? Well, do as I say, don't do as I do. That has never worked for anybody.
No.
It's never worked for anybody. Kids see right through that. Oh, that's hypocrisy. That's why some people won't step foot in a church. There's just a bunch of hypocrites in there. Granted, the hypocrites need to be there. Like, God came for this, like, what is it? Like, he came for the sick, he didn't came for those who are well. Like, we do need the sick people in there. We do need the people who are, like, really struggling. But it's like, no, if you're living with Christ, you should be living right before him.
Yeah.
Made right by your faith. Like, by your faith, you are made righteous. So as you walk in faith, you will ultimately, as you're submitting to that revelation of the salvation of Jesus Christ, who he is, who he should be in your life, you're going to become righteous as you're submitting to that path. So you're not living as a hypocrite anymore. And if you do something hypocritical, you become incredibly remorseful. Like, you work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Lord, forgive me. Ooh, that was off. That was off. And you admit it to other believers because you're like, ain't no way I'm going to hide this junk in my closet. I'm not putting bad fruit in the closet because you know what's going to happen? It's going to rot. And what happens when it rots? There's going to be all sorts of critters and creatures and insects that are going to be attracted to that. And that's going to fill my whole household. Ain't no way. It's got to go. It's got to go. It's got to go to the trash. And if it's in full view, if it's a little bit embarrassing, at least it's out of my house. If somebody sees me taking that fruit out of my house, hey, at least you see me. It's out. It's out. I'm not cool with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think about this too, like, I talked about this recently with Michael, about how do we raise our children to experience God and to love God and to obey him and not just do it off of, I told you so. I think about it like, we need to be, we've lived under multiple generations that have done the do as I say, not as I do. And who have said you have to go to church and you have to not watch things that are bad for you or not eat bad food, but they never told us why. And now we're seeing the fullness of that come to fruition. Rebellion and the subsequent destruction.
Yeah.
So we need to be intentional with actually this would be a great example. We were just talking about my parents had the sex talk with me. They talked with me finally about how to have sex, what sex is, when I was 15 years old. And it was about 5 years too late for me because I discovered pornography when I was 11. 11 years old. Fortunately, the Lord had freed me from that when I was 13.
Yeah.
And I'd figured everything out by the time I was 14. But I think my parents were a little nervous about having that talk with me. And we cannot be nervous about it. We have to learn how to do it afraid if we're going to be nervous.
Yeah. We can't shy away.
No. Because I mean,
because our
if
kids' souls
the Lord had not
are at
intervened in
stake.
my life, I don't know what my life would look like. Could I have still been in pornography at 15? Yeah, because a lot of people are. I'm blessed by the Lord to have gotten out when I did.
Yeah.
My life would look a lot different if not for the Lord. And I don't want to run that risk with my children.
Yeah.
What you allow into your house, what you allow into your mind matters a lot more than you think.
There's no such thing as a passive viewer.
No.
Like that doesn't happen because your kids are sponges. We are all sponges. Like, it's funny, like somebody made me aware of like little idiosyncrasies that I have, like when I laugh or when I smile. They're like, you scrunch your nose up when you laugh, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I do. I'm like, dang. Or like I have a vein that pops out of my forehead when I laugh really hard. And it's funny, like people take notice of that. Like you take notice of what other people do. Also to measure that too, like my dad also said, like you think more about yourself than anyone else does. So like don't think so highly of yourself. You're not that important. But it does go to say, like, your kids are sponges. They pay attention to every little thing you do. It's just wild. It really is. And their souls are at stake.
Yeah.
Their souls are at stake.
Just because you're a Christian does not mean your children will be.
Yeah.
You have to be wrestling for them. Crying out for their souls. It goes back to living your whole life intentionally. You cannot just let things through.
Yeah.
And while that may sound exhausting to have to live your whole life intentionally, one, it's so much better. It's so much sweeter to live that way. You get so much more out of your life, but also you're not doing it by yourself either. You do have the Spirit.
You do.
And you can rest in the Spirit.
That's what it looks like. It's communion with the Spirit. When you start communion with the Spirit, like just speaking to Him all day long, you know, I'm like just doing it when I'm driving, when I'm walking to class, when I'm in class sometimes, just like, you know, just wherever I'm like constantly just like, all right, like, Lord, what do you want me to say? Like, I'm just blessing His name. As you're constantly doing that, it's a practice. It's not just a practice. It is a lifestyle of communion with the Spirit. That I want my kids to experience in a greater measure.
Yes.
So if I'm not doing it, I mean, what's to say that they're going to do it? Like, my mom was living that out, that communion with the Spirit, speaking in tongues. And because I had that modeled for me, it was easier for me to accept that. Because I had that modeled in the home. Like, this is a thing. You know? I remember telling my friends in middle school and high school where I went to church, and they're like, oh, is that the place where they speak in tongues? I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, that's crazy, bro. I'm like, I mean, it's a little wild, but I mean, it's a heavenly utterance to Him. And so all that goes to say, like, you know, trying to purify your life, like you need Him to do that with you and for you. So you have to commune with Him, commune with His Spirit, so that He convicts you when something's off. Like, He gives us a way out. What is that in Hebrews?
No, it's not Hebrews because it's something that Paul says. I think it's Romans, one of the last chapters of Romans.
Oh yeah, you might be right. Like, He gives us a way out when we are tempted.
I could still be wrong though. It's been a minute since I read Romans.
Let me see. Let me see here. Let me see. Either way, like it says in the word, like he will give you a way out. Like when we are tempted, he provides a way out. So like when you're being tempted, like he's going to convict you and he's going to let you know how you can get out of it. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing, you can get out of it. So it's just funny. Like if you're drowning and you see a hand reaching out to you, ready to pull you up into a boat, are you going to take it or are you just going to keep drowning? And then are you going to whine when you drown? You can't be mad at any... Oh, this is the way, like, this has really stirred up intimacy with the Lord, truly seeing him rightly in the sense of just developing reverence and great love and appreciation for who he is. It is inappropriate to be angry at him.
100%.
It is inappropriate to be angry at him. Doesn't mean that you can't approach him being angry about something, but it is inappropriate to be angry with him. Mm-hmm. That is not your place. And it is challenging for people to hear that.
It is.
But he also loves us in a challenging way. So like you just can't be mad. You cannot be mad. If you fell, that was on you, bro. You let that happen to you. Like, don't, oh, I can't believe you'd allow the enemy to, like, just attack me like that. Like, I mean, we live in a fallen world where there's freedom of choice. You know, sometimes that's just what happens. Like, you know, Ecclesiastes speaks to that. Like, you know, the righteous and the wicked, like they both will be blessed. Both of them will also be, you know, harmed. Like, there is sometimes just no rhyme or reason to it all. But there also is, you know, another truth in the sense of like, hey, sometimes you opened up a door for the enemy to move and operate in your life.
True story.
You gave him authority. He has no authority here other than the authority that we've given him as human beings with the freedom of choice. Because God rules above it all. He is sovereign. We just sometimes choose like, well, no, I want to rebel. I want to do my own thing. And God's like, all right, if that's what you want to do, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. But most people don't know because they're not aware that God will not be mocked. A man will reap what he sows. Mm-hmm. And most of the time we cause our own problems.
Absolutely. I probably caused 100% of my own problems. And if it's not 100%, it's 99.9%. You got to take accountability, especially as men. Take accountability for your actions. Stop blaming other people. Look in the mirror, have a hard conversation with yourself in front of God. Be honest with yourself and be honest with him, before him. And he can move in your life if you do that. Yeah. And that's speaking from experience. Anytime I woke up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm feeling you, Lord. I don't know if I want to do this. This is where I'm at, but this is what I want from you. Boom, struck like a dagger to the heart again. Like, oh my gosh, you are worthy. And it was just like, oh my gosh, you love me, you love me, you love me. Like, he will work with honesty. He will work with honesty. My mom used to say this all the time. She still says this to this day. It's favorite saying. The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. And whom the Son has set free is free indeed. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not speaking your truth. It's speaking the truth.
Yes.
And our generation gets caught up in that your truth business. And it's just crap. Like, it really is. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. I had a conversation with one of my classmates recently where he's like, yeah, I grew up religious, going to a Catholic church, and like, I was an altar boy and everything. He's like, I just don't know I want, to like force my kids into that, because I was kind of forced into it. I'm like, well, you know who Jesus Christ is, right? Yeah. It's like, he is the way, the truth, and the life. You're telling me you don't want to share the truth with your kids? Like, the language of the devil is lies. So, if you're not sharing the truth with them, what are you going to share?
Yeah, what are they going to grow up with?
What are they going to grow up with?
Learn? You're not going to indoctrinate them? Guess what? All education at some level is indoctrination. Mm-hmm. They will learn something.
Yeah.
what are they going to learn? You can help dictate that, force them into it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not learning from you, then they're going to learn from somebody else.
And as a shepherd of your family, you are held accountable for your flock. So again, before you get married, before you have children, you have to be accountable for your mistakes, because you will be held accountable for your family. Like that's what ministry is. It's like understanding, like, I am held accountable for those I lead.
Yes.
Before the King of Kings. I do not want to cause them to stumble. I do not want to cause my children to stumble, my wife to stumble. I want to draw them nearer to Him. If that is not at the heart of my marriage, if that is not at the heart of raising my kids, then what am I doing? It should all be drawing us all nearer to Him.
Yeah.
It's accountability and intentionality married together with Him at the heart.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on this before we change subjects is you might be thinking, well, I'm just going to teach my children to be good people. Well, I've got news for you. Good people don't go to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Come on now.
Only redeemed people do.
Yeah.
Tough rocks, but it's true.
Yeah.
Only redeemed people go to heaven. Because another tough rock, there are no good people.
I'm glad you said it, because that was stirring in my heart.
You may think that there are good people, and there are people who do good actions, but there are no good people at heart. All of us are unrighteous.
Mm-hmm.
Every last one. And it will be shown to us on the last day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything that's not of Him will be burned out. I remember having this revelation. I was like, Lord, I don't want to stand before you and look back on my life and realize that none of it was for you. That would be so embarrassing and scary. That's a frightening thought.
Yeah.
Like, I just stuttered a little bit there because it's so frightening. I was like, Lord, this needs to be all about you. Like, I want to bring you the harvest. Like, I need to know, like, when we burn things out, I don't want there to be much burning out.
That would be nice.
I was like, I want like this section from where I've decided to follow you and moving forward, like, boom. I got some hefty, not leftovers, but I've got something hefty to bring to your table.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we talked about Christians approaching art, and a lot of that delved into what we're allowing our children to see, what we're allowing our families to see, because that's what art is at some level. It's, I guess, here in America, we've made entertainment the primary art form.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot more commercialized.
A lot more accessible, a lot more consumable.
Mm-hmm.
And it matters what you consume very much. So let's talk about Christians making art. How do we do that well? You've really honed this point in, like, for the glory of God, obviously.
Yeah.
What other considerations do you think there are for Christians who want to make art?
Yeah, I mean, get connected with other Christian musicians who are, like I said, spirit-filled and excellent at what they do, and ask them, like, all right, I want to get into music, and just have conversations with them about, like, what you're passionate about. Just be honest. Hey, I want to play guitar. Hey, I want to sing. Or, maybe it's an artist who's into, like, graphic design. Like, hey, I want to get into, like, making videos. Or maybe it's a Christian photographer. Hey, I want to do this. Gain some insight. Get some sort of mentor. Ask them if they have time. If they don't, figure out some way to pay them for their time, or figure out some sort of course that you can take. Invest in developing some sort of skill set. That's something Jordan and I have talked about. It's like, as young men, we should be looking to gather skill sets to be utilized for the kingdom of God. So, for you, you developed this podcast. You developed, the Bible studies that you have with these young men. You've also got, career goals that you shared with me. You've got discipline from the National Guard. Like, you've got all these, like, skills and these approaches and these disciplines in your life that you've accumulated because you're willing to be moved, because you're willing to be put out of your comfort zone for the sake of the kingdom. Because, I mean, there's just some practice. Like, I love how the spiritual just speaks to the practical as well. So in the sense of, like, you understand, like, you are called to take care of your family in a practical sense. You got to pay the bills. Food's got to be on the table. You got to have a car to go places. So if you don't have skills, if you don't have a resume that is, you know, that is filled, that is well laid out, like, you can't really expect God to be able to use that as much as somebody. Let me rephrase. If you've got more skills, if you've got experience, God is going to be able to use that. Whereas if you've been sitting back and twiddling your thumbs, I mean, those who can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. So, really what I would just express to, like, Christian artists or people interested in getting into Christian art is, like, spend that time, spend that money. Before you do all that, though, take it to the Lord and ask him, what is it you want to do through this? Is this something that would please you? And just measure that. And then move towards it. If he hasn't said no, move towards it. I think sometimes we too often live red until green, when men should be living more green until red.
What do you mean by that?
So it's very important that you should be seeking God wholeheartedly. If you're not seeking God wholeheartedly, I would probably say maybe do a little bit more red until you see a green light. Now, if you're seeking him wholeheartedly, you truly, truly love him, then you can probably go green until red. So you can pursue desires that, if you're living for him, he's giving you the desires of his heart. That's the thing I ask. I'm like, Lord, give me the desires of your heart so that I know I can pursue the desires that are in my heart that are in alignment with your word and your will, so that I'm not stagnant. A parked car cannot be steered, but a car in motion can be. We can hit a corner if we need to. So, that's really the way I've been trying to live my life. It's like, all right, Lord, where do you want me to go next? I want to be constantly moving forward in my life towards you and for the sake of my family. Those people that have been called to lead and model what living should look like. So, that's what this program, the MBA program, is. It's like, all right, Lord, I'm accumulating all these skills as far as, like, my business acumen for the sake of the kingdom, whether that be within the Christian artistry space or nonprofit space or both, whatever that looks like. So really just ask the Lord, like, Lord, what am I good at? What passions of my heart, what desires of my heart are in alignment with your word and your will? Before all that, just seek his kingdom first. And then if God has released you to do that, get connected. Ask questions. Get connected in the body of Christ. Be in a body of Christ. If you're not doing that already, then, like, you need to get connected to a body. The body of Christ, not just a body of people, but the body of Christ. Get connected to a church, because that's where you'll find some amazing, talented people who are on fire for the Lord, who can help mentor you and steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I especially like your point of being excellent, making it excellent. I think that I don't think I could probably say objectively, there's a lot of Christian art that's not good.
Yeah.
A lot of Christian movies, a lot of Christian music, a lot of Christian books that are not good because they're not excellent.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're biblically accurate, but they were, garbage and nobody cares about seeing them. I think about this sometimes with like books and movies, especially. Christians, I think, need to do much better at making cultural pieces that capture people's imaginations. I think about, like, The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Timeless book that everybody loves, written by a Christian man who put in Christian ideas into his book. And I mean, I don't know that he was what his heart posture was at the time, if he was trying to point towards the Lord or not. But it's a book that is excellent, that's timeless, that everybody loves, written by a Christian man with Christian ideas. And subsequently, the movies, I think, are genuinely the best movies that have ever been made.
Yeah.
The best movies that have ever been made, without a single sex scene, without a single foul word, without, broken families or any of the terrible things that you see in art nowadays, art, quote unquote. It's not there, and everybody loves it, and everybody thinks it's great. We need to make more of that.
Yeah.
More of that.
Yeah, we need to encourage Christians who love the Lord, who are speaking the gospel plainly, Christian artists who love the Lord, who are speaking the gospel plainly, who are maybe doing some unconventional things within the creative space. Like, we need to encourage different approaches to the way music is made. It's like we don't change what the gospel is or how it's presented. We just change the way that we express it, in the sense that it still needs to be in alignment with his word. It's like, bro, don't do something that's off the wall just for the sake of being creative. But that was something Michael and I talked about. It's like, dude, we just really need to encourage more creativity in the church. As to what that looks like, I have no clue. There's some answers to some questions I don't have. I just know, I'm like, yep, I think you're right there, Michael. I think you're right. We need to encourage people to not gather up wealth for themselves, but for the kingdom here.
Yeah.
We do need to encourage some young men and some young women. It's like, hey, if God has called you to a career where you're making a lot of money, go for it. As long as you steward that wealth for the sake of his kingdom here on earth.
Yes.
We need wealthy people for the sake of the kingdom to give to the poor. It's only a problem when you become the rich young ruler.
Yes.
And if he calls you to give it all up, sell all your possessions, and follow him, and he won't. So if wealth is not going to be an idol for you, and he has called you to it, by all means. By all means. You are released to do that. You do not have to feel guilty for doing that. And that's not making a concession. That's just being, you look at somebody like Joseph of Arimathea. That is somebody who was a man of means. He was a man of means, and he was able to provide a resting place for Jesus' body. So, you look at somebody like Paul. He was also a tent maker. This man was a missionary getting beaten up, flogged, thrown out of towns, and he's still providing for his own needs to set an example for the churches.
And he says it multiple times in his letters. We have a right to ask you for food and shelter and money, but we didn't take it so that we could set an example for you. I also think about this too. A lot of people, especially for our current generation, a lot of people look to cultural icons, not necessarily the people, but the stuff that they've made, as being their role models. People talk about there's no good role models in movies anymore.
Yeah.
Where you had, I don't know what a good role model would necessarily be, but I guess you don't have any Aragorns popping up anymore in your movies. And I think about that, where especially for children, I've collected a large amount of books, and some of those books are just storybooks, because I'm not gonna give my children an electrician's manual, because they're not going to be in a position where they will be willing to consume that.
Yeah.
But they will consume stories that will help to form their character on top of what the gospel is preaching. I remember I read lots of stories growing up, and I remember being that's a cool guy. I want to be like him. And I think that is an important part of the conversation too, is especially as we're talking about what we're not allowing our children to see, what are we allowing our children to see?
Yeah.
Examples of bravery and excellence in stories. I think that's a good thing, and that we should encourage that.
My mom would always make me read biographies as a kid, and she's like, because these are stories that are true. That's even better.
Yes.
And my dad used to frame it this way. He's like, you're not just learning about a person, you're learning about the circumstances of the history that they lived in. Like the time, the government, the policies, the culture. He's like, you're learning so many different things within a biography. And so my mom would make me read biographies about Christian missionaries. So that's why I spoke about Eric Liddell earlier.
Yep.
Another one was Corrie ten Boom, who hid Jewish people in Europe during the time of the Holocaust. And she was actually put in one of the camps. I believe her sister passed away, and I don't know what she might have reunited with her sister after the war. Either way, like she has an insane testimony.
Yes. Yes, she does.
And also just read a book about Samuel Morris. And I remember, so he was an African prince who, oh my gosh, I can't remember if he was sold to another tribe or if he was captured by another tribe from the tribe that he was in, because those two tribes were rivals. But anyways, he was kidnapped. He's tied to some post. They've been beating him all day and they're going to kill him. And he is absolutely frightened. And the way Samuel Morris described the story was like a light shone down from heaven. All of a sudden his ropes, like everything that had like bound him to this log or this pole, just fell. And he heard a voice say, run. And so he runs into the jungle. He finds himself like ending up on some ship later on. He's traveling to America. It's funny, he knows that God is real. Like he has an encounter with who God is, in just an insane way. Like he died when he was 19. Like he studied at, I can't remember what university he studied at. But this was a man who was on fire for the Lord. On fire. And he saw wild things happen. And he just preached the gospel boldly. He saw souls saved. And he just saw miracles. And I remember reading that book and I'm like, wow, what do I have to do to get a faith like that? To see God move in my life like that?
You said he died at 19?
He died at 19. He lived such a short life, but it was incredibly impactful. Incredibly impactful. I'm like, I did nothing in my 19 years of life. I'm like, Lord. I just remember reading it. I'm like, how? Like, how do you live like that? Mm-hmm. The great expectation he had for what the Lord could do. How? That's what we need to feed our kids.
Yeah.
Like, this is what faith can produce. He can do anything with anybody. With anybody. An African prince who didn't even know who God was, who didn't even know who Jesus Christ was, ended up living his life for the Lord, bringing other people to the Messiah. That's wild. That's wild.
Glory.
Like we always talk about like fostering kids' imaginations. That's the way you foster their imagination. Get them to think about who he is.
I agree. About what's possible with the Lord. Just like you said, what's possible with the Lord. I had a similar experience. I read the autobiography of Charles G. Finney. What an incredible testimony. Dude just dropped. He kind of grew up with the church, around the church, and he was a lawyer, and he just one day was like, I don't know if I'm saved. So he went out in the woods and he prayed all day, and he worked out his faith. He said, okay, I believe in the Lord. I'm going to preach the gospel for the rest of my life. He stopped being a lawyer, and everywhere he went, he would walk into a town, he'd say, hey, we're having a meeting over at the schoolhouse, or we're having a meeting over at the town hall. And he would preach the gospel to them, and everybody in the town would accept Jesus. And he just did that his whole life. With a few exceptions, a few times that he had to struggle with churches that were already there.
Yeah.
And he said, this is how I did it. Secret prayer, public prayer, inviting people, conversation, preaching the gospel. And he also said, I am convinced that you cannot share the gospel and have it be effective in someone's heart unless you have the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely.
That was a life-changing book. Yeah.
Yeah, because the gospel isn't a matter of words, it's a matter of power.
It is not a matter of talk, but a matter of power.
Mm-hmm. It's understanding that they need a personal encounter.
Well, Nate, we've talked a little bit about art, talked about your testimony.
Mm-hmm.
What do you really want young men to learn? What do you think young men need to know in this current generation, this current day and age?
I think it's balancing the intentionality. I kind of spoke to this earlier. It's balancing the intentionality of having a vision for your life, developing vision, developing purpose in alignment with His Word and His will, and also not being set too much on those plans. I make plans and the Lord laughs at them. Not out of a way of mocking me, but because it's just like, it's when you see your kid, we don't have kids yet, but it's like when you see a kid kind of like tell you like, I'm a superhero, like you just kind of laugh at him. You're like, oh, bless your heart.
Yes.
That's the way He laughs at my plans. I'm somebody who I try to be very intentional. So I have vision for my life, in the sense of like, this is when I want to get married, this is when I want to buy a house, this is when I want to start having kids, this is the ideas that I have for getting into ministry, this is what I hope that'll look like, this is the kind of business that I would like to run, this is who I would like to run it with, this is about where I would like to run it, this is the name. Like, I have all these details, but at the end of the day, it's like, all right, Lord, if you want to take the furniture out of my house so that you can bring something else in, or maybe you just want the house to be barren, do so. So it's also just being very careful how, like who do you communicate that with? Your intentionality for your vision. It's like, don't tell everybody like your dreams. Look at what happened with Joseph when he told his brothers his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
They despised him for it. Like, use some wisdom, use some discernment. Don't hide it. Like, don't be weird about it. Like, definitely take that to your mentors, people you can trust. But develop vision with the Lord. Develop vision. It's just so vital. Like, what are you living for? What are you gonna do for Him in your lifetime? Lord, what do you want me to do? And start moving towards something. I see so many guys, they're like, oh, I'm just in a waiting season, brother. For 3 years? For 4 years? I mean, dude, we're going to be responsible for, being the head of the church. Like, He is the head of the church, but we're going to be responsible for overseeing the church. What are we going to do if no one has any houses for us to meet in after church? What are we going to do if no one's married and we're not having kids? Like, what are we going to do? Like, I mean, He's going to take care of us. He provides for His sheep. He leads us besides, He leads us beside streams of water into green pastures. Like, He leads us into those places. He leads us into promised lands. But it's like, I mean, are you going to move or not, bro? If the Israelites never took one step forward, they weren't going to ever leave Egypt. Even though God was like, I'll lead you out. I'll lead you out of Egypt. You got to follow. You got to put one foot in front of the other. You got to keep moving. So, and that's not to say like you strive and strive and strive, because we always talk about that in the church, the striving mindset. It's like, no, understand this. Like, a farmer is responsible for various aspects of his job. The farmer has to till the soil, and he has to sow the seed. He has to spray the pesticides. It is up to the Lord to let the rains fall, let the sun shine, so that that crop may grow. And then once it grows, once it's ready for the harvest, the farmer has to go back out into the field to reap the harvest. You are responsible for certain aspects in the sense of like the blessings that He releases in your life as far as stewardship is concerned. You need to steward what He has given you well. Like, that was something I spoke to earlier. It's like, oh my gosh, Lord, I am taking too casually the blessings You released in my life for Your glory. There are things that You want to give me as well because You love me. But if I'm not stewarding that well, if I'm not stewarding these blessings well, these opportunities well, I won't even receive the blessing for me, let alone give You glory. I had that reverse. I won't be able to give you glory, let alone receive the blessings you want to give me. So just balancing intentionality with being completely surrendered and submitted. Don't be so sold on your plans, but also work towards the plans that he's given you. And when he redirects you, be obedient. And don't worry.
That's good. You got any closing thoughts?
Man, God is good all the time. All the time. And we get so caught up in well, what about my situations? What about my circumstances? God is good. God is good. Regardless. He's giving you an inheritance that never perishes, spoils, or fades. This is one of my favorite verses in this season. It's I think it's 1st or 2nd Peter. Oh no, wait a minute.
Since we're
1
not
Peter.
recording this with a video, I want you all to know he has the entire New Testament highlighted. The entire thing is highlighted and underlined, and many notes are written on the sides.
So this is 1 Peter 1. I'm just going to read 3 through 9. It's a long passage, but I think it's important to be scripture heavy in this podcast. So it says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you have not seen him, you love him, and even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, for you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls." That's the heart of praise and worship. That's a lifestyle of praise and worship. That's why we live that lifestyle. So that's my encouragement. Live a lifestyle of praise and worship unto the Lord. For him, solely unto him. For his glory and his glory alone.
Amen. Nate, do you have any contact information you want to send out for people to contact you, or if you've got a ministry that you're putting together?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Nathan Feldpausch. So that's NATHAN FELDPAUSCH. So if you see somebody who's working for Michigan State University, feel free to connect with me. Send me a message on there. Like I said, I really don't have social media besides LinkedIn. That's for professional purposes. But if you want to talk about Jesus Christ on LinkedIn, I'm not going to turn you away. I'm not going to turn you away.
Very good. I'm going to have to get real creative with how to end everything to be about being relentless. Relentless pursuit of the Lord is a blessing in and of itself. Because he responds in greater measure than we are capable of giving forth to him. Relentless pursuit of him will bring about a lifestyle of blessing. That may not sound to some of you like that makes any kind of sense, but we're speaking from experience.
Yeah.
We have experienced it ourselves.
And if it can happen for us, it can happen for anybody.
Yes.
Anybody.
Anybody at all. So live relentless, pursue relentlessly. We'll see you on the other side. I love you guys.